Morning and welcome to the Northern Corridor Group Commercial Property Update for the week of the 14th of May. I'm sitting here with Chris Massey, Michael Shevforth and Brock Hambrick, and just running through the stats of the last 2 weeks on what to measure and what to watch, so we can keep track on what's truly happening at the coalface of the market. So the trend for the last 3 weeks has been pretty consistent across all of the measurements. So we run the measurements for the whole life cycle of a property from the day it's listed to the day it settles and all the steps in between. So you'll see the listings have spiked pretty well. And when we dig deeper, there's been quite a lot of activity on the Sunshine Coast of new properties coming to market. So we see the listings have climbed well across the group. The inquiry across the last 4 weeks has been starting to trend north again, which is a positive sign. Industrial's been quite positive, and retail has actually been surprisingly quite strong in the recovery from where we saw the March slump especially in retail in the orange there. So we're seeing it's making a good recovery, and industrial stayed fairly strong the whole way through. Inspections really spiked about a week ago, a little bit off last week with the shorter work week, but generally people back out and about and checking in on property. The offers have really come through strong in the last 2 weeks, and that is converting into more deals, but there's still a gap there, which implies that there's a bit of still a little bit of bottom feeding in people thinking they can get a bargain, throwing some offers forward and seeing what sticks. This is an interesting stat out of our management portfolio. So these are the properties that are actually impacted by the COVID and that have asked for rent reductions. So 57% of our 400 odd properties haven't been affected, which leaves that 43% that have asked for rent assistance. Of that 43%, we'll see only 6% have been in the industrial sector. So that's still powering on pretty well. So that's 6% of 43%, which I know no one on this call is good enough to work out instantly, but it's about 3% of industrial tenants are actually hitting the JobKeeper status where they're allowed to ask for assistance. So we'll see the hospitality and the retail were the hardest hit in our portfolio so far, but even they're coming back pretty well. So, Michael, what are you seeing up Sunshine Coast?
Well, it's been, like Christmas on the weekend. Once the JobKeeper payments came in and the restrictions lifted, it was like a magic storm. You couldn't get into shopping centres on the weekend up here, Ashley, and the beaches were packed. So it was absolutely astonishing to see. The weather was fantastic on the Saturday, and there were people out everywhere. That's going to play in well to what I think the Sunshine Coast is going to come into its own during this period. There's a few big things that are happening here. Already we're seeing a massive spike in domestic tourism, up to 60% increase in inquiry for November, December already for our tourism operators, which is a massive increase compared to what they usually see. That's going to be fueled by the fact that you can't travel overseas, obviously, and the Sunshine Coast is truly going to benefit from that.
But no, that's interesting with the tourism, because we're seeing the same with the industries affected by it. So the caravan industries are really powering at the moment. We actually just did a case study this week with Blake from our office on a new expanding camper van business in Caboolture here. But we're seeing it across all the tourism sectors. And there's some food operators as well, you were saying.
Yeah, well, today is an interesting day. Today we've got 3 inspections booked today. All 3 are food-based or, principally retail-based businesses that have grown so significantly during COVID-19 in terms of their online business, and their belief in that business is a massive. One is a online pasta business. The other is an online cheese business that sells you packages of cheese on a weekly subscription. They can't keep up with demand. They've moved for a second time during COVID-19. And the other is a retail business that focuses primarily on products that are safe for the environment. All of them are so confident coming out of this. And of course, that's off our deal that we did last week for a fashion retailer out of Noosa that went from 400 square metres to 1,700 square metres, all in COVID-19. So, the transformation for living on the Sunshine Coast in a beach atmosphere and being a global online business is promising for us, along with those other aspects that I spoke about. So we've seen a 100% increase in inquiry in the last 2 weeks, particularly this week, where and the inspections are going through the roof. Actually,
I was reading this morning that's reflected with Stockland's numbers as well. So I'll have a few articles in the update today as well that you can all click through. But there's talk of we've had the sea change and the tree change, but there's a COVID change that is starting to see the impact of with people, the proof of concept of not having to work in an office. So they're expecting a flow out from the CBDs into slightly more detached and regional areas. So that'll be interesting to watch over the next few months. Chris, how are you finding it?
Yeah, just following on from what Michael was saying, the confidence is increasing weekly, especially in the last week with the COVID-19 money coming through. We're seeing some inquiry from office space, which we haven't seen in some time. Most of that inquiry is the business owners looking at changing their structure. So most of them are looking at, where they previously may have been in 200 square metres, they're now looking at maybe bringing that down to 150. So they're just looking at all of those little intricacies in their business. So we haven't seen a lot of transactions there yet, but definitely seeing inspections and those inquiries coming through. The industrial leasing is still quite strong in that sub 1,000, so lots of little movement there. But we have seen a number of, or some new stock coming on. So it's interesting to see that there are some businesses that have either shut down or moved on, but those are quickly being looked at by other business, and in particular, quite often the neighbour who's outgrowing where they are. So
yeah, there's going to be a lot of musical chairs off the back of this as the winners and losers shuffle to fit the new norm. And I know Emily up the coast has been talking about the allied health push up in her area, where owner occupiers and tenants have been running pretty hard on office space. So that's, the numbers are showing we're seeing that across all three offices. So, Rock, how are you finding it, mate?
I think to follow on from Michael and Chris's point about the confidence in the market and that sort of stuff, if you look at the investor and the sales side of the market off the back of that, I think the confidence is allowing people to make strategic plays at the moment. And that can be done in a number of ways. First of all, it could be potentially done by somebody who's currently owner occupying their property, but may sell the property as a tenanted investment with a lease back so that they have cash resources to reinvest into the business, because either one, they need it as part of the issues that they faced during COVID-19, or two, they've done well during COVID-19 and this is the chance to capitalise on the business right now by taking the cash out of the property. We're seeing a lot of owner-occupied buyers returning to the market, and I think that's because money's never been cheaper than it has been now. Yes, lending is a little bit harder and all the flow-on effects of that. However, the upside to that is that most business people understand where they're at financially, have spoken to their accountant, spoke to the mortgage broker, etc., and can I jump through those hoops? If I can, now's the time to be borrowing, because how cheap money is at the moment, and that's their strategic play.
Yeah, and everyone's had to do their homework on their own financials with all of the COVID and the JobKeeper, so they're actually coming in pretty well qualified, I'm finding, with their financials in place and their understanding of their own financial situation. Two takeaways I've seen across the group this week is there's some tenants and owners capitalising on the instant asset write-off. So we've put together some information that's going to be attached in this email as well. Just gives you an idea of what how some owners and some tenants are actually capitalising on the ability to invest in the business, like you were saying, Brock, to even sell down the property, invest back into infrastructure that's going to let them take the business to the next level. The second thing is stock coming on the market there's been a big gap and really low year on year compared to last year. Pretty decent demand, especially for tenant and investment stock. And if you're an owner that's just on the verge of selling, the marketing costs at the moment are super low and the cut through is really high because there isn't that much getting out there. So the newspapers, the online portals, so the engagement is up is significant. I want to say it's about 30% up year on year in terms of the key major internet portals. So there's a whole lot of eyeballs on not many properties, and the cost of getting in front of those eyeballs is the lowest we've seen. It's kind of like fuel prices; they've come down due to lack of demand of properties coming on. So really good opportunity there for owners to pull the trigger on getting their property in front of some good eyeballs, which is counter to the kind of the feel at the moment is some sellers are saying, let's just limp it out there, put it to the database or just see what the market thinks, just trying to test the waters. It's an understandable concern, but the opportunities there now to go big and get in front of all those eyes. And at the end of the day, the owners control the process. You don't have to accept the offer that doesn't meet your requirements. So it's best to cast that big net, and the opportunity is there to do it.
I think, Ashley, on top of that, when we talk about the national press will focus on areas like Southeast Queensland due to the restriction of growth through population immigration in the southern states and migration numbers as they start to come through, then all of those investor eyes particularly are going to look to these places as the place to be in terms of security during a pandemic and also a low base to grow off. So I think that those advertising eyeballs, not only are they cheaper, but they're further abroad than we're used to. And I gather the numbers from south of the border are going to be much higher than we're used to as well. So, out of region purchases will be sharply focused on our regions.
And there's a chance we do really well through this northern corridor because our immigration is traditionally domestic, forced out from the southern states by the international migration coming in and upping the prices. So the international migration is going to drop, but we haven't been really reliant on that international. It's always been the domestic market that comes into that North Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast area. So we still might see that organic growth coming through over the next year.
It was interesting listening to Brian White talk about that last week, wasn't it? Where he was saying, during these crises that they've had in the growth of the Whites business, they've always been a really good outturn from those crises where people have migrated north and, evading their way to the sunny coast or to the northern corridor is going to be something that we see as a trend going forward from that transition from wealth building to lifestyle creating. And I can only see us benefiting from that as well.
Perfect. That's really good, guys. All right. Anyone, if you've got any questions on how any of this information is going to impact your property or your business, but the whole team's available. We're back in office and back running full speed. So talk to you next week.